Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. We're going to start out with two prominent news people tonight. The first is Cokie Roberts, who died recently at the age of 75. Cokie Roberts came from a political background. Her father was Hale Boggs, longtime representative from Louisiana, and she became one of the country's most prominent journalists based out of Washington, most notably for NPR and then for ABC. Here is ABC on the career of Cokie Roberts.
We're going to turn now to the sad news we first delivered earlier today here. Our longtime colleague and friend Cokie Roberts has passed away at the age of 75. Tonight she's being celebrated by presidents and first ladies, by so many of us in journalism. She was a pioneer. But we all know the role Cokie treasured most, the role of mother and grandmother. She had a brilliant mind matched only by her kindness, her grace, and of course, her wit. Born into a political family in Louisiana, her full name was Mary Martha Corinne Morrison Claiborne Boggs, but her brother could not pronounce her name. To him, she was Cokie. That's who she was to the rest of us, too.
Oh, thank you for having me, and please call me Cokie. Well, I will, but I'm from the South, too, so you know how that goes.
Cokie Roberts' father was longtime Congressman Hale Boggs, at one point the majority leader. He was killed in a plane crash, and his wife, Lindy Boggs, would win his seat. Together, Cokie's parents would represent the people of New Orleans in Congress for nearly 50 years. Cokie grew up in the South, but she was also a young witness to history at our nation's capital. It left an impression on her how much the women were really doing.
We watched them run the political conventions, their husbands' offices, their campaigns.
Cokie did consider politics as a young woman, but instead she decided to report on it, to witness it. A student at Wellesley, she met her future husband, Stephen Roberts, at a political meeting in 1962. He was studying at Harvard, a budding journalist himself. They would marry in 1966, and President Lyndon Johnson famously attended their wedding. Cokie's mother, Lindy, actually cooking food for the crowd of 1,500. Along the way, Cokie would remember that first job, anchoring a public affairs program in Washington. She was just 21. It was called Meeting of the Minds.
It was essentially reporting and then writing very brief little stories, and I loved it.
She would become a political commentator for NPR, and in 1988, she would join ABC News.
We're following two major stories tonight.
She would contribute to ABC's This Week, and then co-anchor the program with Sam Donaldson.
What is your definition of womanizing, Sam?
Most women know it when they see it, Senator.
And through the years, every big political night, Cokie was there too. Her interviews with presidents and first ladies. Cokie was an author and historian too, writing more than a half-dozen books, so often telling the untold contributions of women in America. And she wrote a book called We Are Our Mother's Daughters, and she said this not so long ago.
What has been the best piece of advice someone has given you regarding
Listen to your mother.
Well, that worked out well.
Cokie would win Emmys. She was named a living legend by the Library of Congress. She was cited one of the 50 greatest women in the history of broadcasting. But it was never the awards or the attention. It was family. Her 2 children, Rebecca and Lee, her 6 grandchildren, and her husband of more than 50 years, Stephen. Tonight, the family saying, we will miss Cokie beyond measure, both for her contributions and for her love and kindness. Former President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama calling Cokie a role model to young women at a time when the profession was still dominated by men, a constant over 40 years of a changing world. President George W. Bush and former First Lady Laura Bush writing, she covered us for decades as a talented, tough, and fair reporter. We respected her drive and appreciated her humor. She became a friend. And tonight, Speaker Nancy Pelosi calling her a trailblazer who forever transformed the role of women in the newsroom. And Save the Children tonight, remembering a tireless champion for children. But to all of us here at ABC News, she was Cokie. She made us all better. Her brilliant mind, her sharp wit, but above all, it was her kindness.
Well, Cokie was pretty good, but the other side of Cokie was documented by James Warren, who used to be the Washington correspondent for the Tribune here in Chicago. He'd do occasional Sunday pieces called the Cokie Watch, where he would document that she traded a lot of her political influence for very high speaking fees, something that's frowned on in a lot of journalistic circles. And probably what's worse is she didn't want to answer any questions about those speaking fees. This coming from someone who was fierce about asking politicians that kind of stuff. Well, we're going to move on to our other news figure, and that's Sandra Vanocur, who died recently at the age of 91. Some people may give me grief for making him the feature tonight, bias against women and all that. But personally, I thought Sandra Vanocur was a better news person than Cokie Roberts. Sandra Vanocur was a staple of political conventions for 25 years. He was also one of the questioners in the Kennedy-Nixon debate in 1960. I think he may have been the last guy alive from that debate. And some people accused him of being too close to the Kennedys, but I can tell you, I don't think he pulled any punches in that respect. He made a point of being objective, something you don't see that much today. Born in Ohio, but he was a Northwestern boy. Here's Tom Lorenzen, who was doing an in-depth interview with him, reviewing Sandra Vanocur's career.
Mr. Vanocur was born in Cleveland and raised there in Peoria, Illinois during the Depression. He's a graduate of Northwestern University and attended the London School of Economics. He went to NBC News early in his career, where he was the White House correspondent and national political correspondent in the 1960s through 1971. He's also well known for having been a panelist for the first debate between Senator Kennedy and Vice President Nixon in 1960, with the first presidential debates held in the 20th century. And he also conducted one of the last interviews with Robert Kennedy before he was assassinated in 1968.
About bombing Hanoi, and we're concerned about that because we're going to kill civilians. Now we're killing large numbers of them as we bomb Saigon.
We covered it live that night throughout the entire evening from the Ambassador Hotel. After leaving NBC News, he went to PBS and Washington Post and worked for them for several years. Then he went to ABC News in 1977 and worked there through 1991, where he served as chief diplomatic correspondent, senior correspondent in Buenos Aires, and was anchor for the first weekly business program, Business World. And he was chief correspondent for the 1980 and 1984 presidential elections. He also later covered the World Economic Summits in 1997, 98, and 1999. And he has done work with the History Channel. And he's also got a son who's an anchorman now with the news in Salt Lake City.
Boundaries, which is perhaps a new way of looking at the way political boundaries are drawn in Utah.
Here is Sandra Vanocur's fine analysis of the 1968 Democratic race, once Lyndon Johnson announced he would not run for a second term. And we have a little Cokie Roberts synergy as he mentions her father.
People have asked me over the years, would Robert Kennedy have won the Democratic presidential nomination if he'd not been killed? And my answer, I don't know. I do know that Lyndon Johnson would have gone to any length at Chicago to deny Kennedy the nomination. That was not because he was wild about his vice president, Hubert Humphrey, who did get the nomination. He didn't care that much for Humphrey. He told people at the time and after he left office that Humphrey was soft, would not follow Johnson's policy in Vietnam if he was elected president. But as much as he disdained Humphrey, he absolutely hated Robert Kennedy. I might add the feeling was mutual. Johnson would have done everything in his power to see Kennedy denied the nomination. And even though he had said he would not seek a second term on the eve of the Wisconsin primary, Johnson and his aides controlled the Chicago convention. When followers of Humphrey, Kennedy, and G. McCarthy tried to work out a less hawkish compromise plank on Vietnam at the convention, Johnson summoned back to Washington the Platform Committee chairman, Congressman Hale Boggs of Louisiana, and read him the Riot Act. No compromise on Vietnam. Because Johnson hated Kennedy so much, I think it would have been difficult, not impossible, just difficult, for Kennedy to have won the nomination.
You don't get analysis like that anymore. Yeah, that's pretty much how it went down. Here he is interviewing Jackie.
Mrs. Kennedy, what changes, if any, have you made in the White House since you moved in?
I really haven't made many, Mr. Vanocur, because one can't. It doesn't belong to anyone but to everyone in this country.
Yes, but you live here. You certainly have a part of the White House. Doesn't the first family have a right to make some changes in the White House?
Yes, one can make one's private bedrooms as one wishes. Everything else is under the approval of the Fine Arts Committee, which I think is marvelous. We do gradual things here and there, more to come. Not very much so far.
Here he is in part of a one-on-one interview with Martin Luther King at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, a little less than a year before Martin Luther King was assassinated.
Dr. King, this church is as good a place as any to go back over your commitment to the civil rights movement. When you went out from here into university and then you went to Montgomery, Alabama and started the bus boycotts there, what was the philosophy of the civil rights movement as you saw it then, more than 10 years ago?
Well, I would say then the philosophy was that we must go all out to use legal and nonviolent methods to gain full citizenship rights for the Negro people of our country. Of course, that particular struggle and that philosophy centered on breaking down all of the barriers of legal segregation. So I would say that in that period, the basic thrust for the gaining of citizenship rights for Negroes was to end the humiliation surrounding the whole system of legal segregation.
Sander Vanocur, as I said, he didn't get the pub Cokie got, but he was better. Well, we're going to leave journalism. By way of introduction of our next subject, there's this.
This is the delightful musical comedy actress and television star, lovely Phyllis Newman.
Thank you.
This is the brilliant comedian, soon to be seen in Mad, 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 Mad World, wonderful Buddy Hackett.
Hello, and is this loud? And we're all here to play Password.
And now, here's your host on Password, Alan Ludden.
Hi, buddy.
Hello, Alvin.
Good to have you back, buddy.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
Phyllis, nice to see you again.
Thank you, Alan. It's nice to be here.
Phyllis, I want to clarify the record. What was the first game show you ever played on television?
Password.
You like Password, don't you, Phyllis?
Of course I do.
We discovered you, didn't we, Phyllis?
Yes, you did.
Now what do you do every afternoon?
To tell the truth.
Every afternoon, and to tell the truth, Phyllis Newman. And you're very good at that game, too.
Thank you. I enjoy it very much, I must say.
I'm glad you're back to play Password with us in the evening.
Thank you.
Well, you got that crazy Buddy Hackett and Alan Ludden, but our subject is Phyllis Newman, who died recently at the age of 86. Beautiful, talented, witty. She should have been a big Broadway star. She actually beat out some woman named Barbara Streisand for a Tony in 1962 for Subways or for Sleeping. And her husband was Adolph Green of Adolph Green and Betty Comden Broadway songwriting fame. People thought those two were married, but Adolph Green was married to Phyllis Newman. Phyllis Newman never made it big on Broadway after that, but she was great on the game shows, and Johnny Carson loved her. She was a regular on To Tell the Truth.
Only one of these men is the real Sanford L. Fox. The other two are imposters, and will try to fool this panel. Tom Poston, Phyllis Newman, Orson Bean, and Kitty Carlisle. On To Tell the Truth with your host, Bud Collier.
Good evening, panel.
Good evening,
Bud.
Hey, Phyllis, welcome to the night show again.
Thank you. It's fun to be here.
Been too long since you were here with us in the nighttime show.
As I said, game show staple and great guest with Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show. We're going to close with Ric Ocasek, who died recently at the age of 75. Some sources said it was 70, but he was 75. And he was the founder, frontman, and songwriter for the new wave group The Cars, one of the best groups of the late 70s and early 80s. Wasn't your typical rock star. He was quiet, not flamboyant. He wasn't exactly good looking, but hey, musicians get the girls. And he was married for 28 years to supermodel Paulina Porizkova. Here are The Cars with their biggest hit, Drive, which was also used as part of the Live Aid famine charity movement. Rick wrote this one, but Ben Orr, his partner, is singing it. My friend Shelley was onto these guys in the late 70s in Cambridge before they hit it big.
You can't go on thinking nothing's wrong. Who's gonna drive you home tonight? Oh, who's gonna drive you home tonight?
Here's one Rick wrote and also sang. It's a good song and it had a good music video attached to it. You might think I'm crazy.
You might think I'm crazy. Hang around with you. Maybe you think I'm lucky. That's something to do. You might think I'm foolish. Maybe it's untrue. You might think I'm crazy. All I want is you.
Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Taps. As a final tribute to Ric Ocasek, I'm going to play my favorite Cars song. He wrote it, Ben Orr sang it. YouTube might cut it, but hey, it's all I can do.
It's all I can do.